start the conversation about the first one, implement server hardening solutions. It's an important one. You could see we have 6 main topics, main exam objective, but this one, yeah, it's very important. A high percentage of the questions you are expecting could come from this, related to this topic, yeah. Well, the first topic related to this exam objective, it's about configuring disk and file encryption. Let's analyze a bit the topics here. Something new in Windows Server 2016? Maybe not so many new topics, yeah, because we're covering BitLocker, and you should be familiar with BitLocker. It's not something new. We're covering as well encrypted file system, which is actually even older topic. Yeah, they started in Windows 2000, I think it was the first implementation of encryption file system. But you could see some topics that I'm considering to insist a bit more. For example, configure the network unlock feature, which it was available in Windows Server 2012, but not so many people already familiar with this one. For example, implementing BitLocker on cluster share volumes, CSV, and storage area networks. Well, what else I could see? Yeah, probably some options, new options, including backup, restore of encryption file system keys and BitLocker certificates and so on. BitLocker. I guess everybody in the room already familiar with BitLocker. Yeah, that is not something new. You know how it's working, BitLocker. You know it's better to have a TPM module on all machines. You are implementing BitLocker. So, by the way, it's BitLocker something very common for Windows servers, for the server machines in the data center. Well, actually not very often you could see, but now it's an incentive, and Microsoft is pushing very strongly this initiative to make the hardware makers to include a TPM module in their hardware of the servers here. Well, it's something you have to consider. Why? Because you are using TPM modules, yeah, for different features, not only for BitLocker. Yeah, it's very important. And even it was not very familiar to have a such hardware piece of hardware in a hardware device, yeah, used for the server. You know, I mean in a server. But now they started to have TPM modules included in the hardware of servers. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not insisting here. You are familiar with the recovery mechanism, 48-digit key, and so on and so on and so on. Well, how to establish BitLocker drive encryption policy in Windows Server 2016, PowerShell. So just a general specification for this exam, and I think I'm not saying something very new for you. You should be very familiar with PowerShell for this exam. Yeah. Actually, PowerShell is one of my favorite topics in the presentations. I'm doing a lot of presentation how to use PowerShell for hacking, especially in advanced and persistent threat scenarios. It's not the major topic for us for our conversation today, but for this exam, you should be very familiar with advanced features in PowerShell. Why? Because most of the features we're talking about security, we're considering to prepare for this exam, are configurable only using PowerShell. There is no GUI interface in order to configure a lot of things. Yeah, you are very happy if you could see a GUI interface in group policy or so to manage some of the security features, but most of them are covered only using PowerShell. Yeah. Okay, so we have, for BitLocker drive encryption policy, we have as well group policy settings. You can configure this using TPM or using a PIN code, and so different options we do have. Well, network unlock feature, yeah, it was. It's of course available in Windows Server 2016. It was present in the first time implemented in the previous version of the Windows Server. Actually, in order to configure network unlock, you need some requirements in the network. And for the exam, you should be prepared, you should be aware about the requirements, and not very few requirements, UEFI, DHCP, for example, configuring DHCP server, no compatibility support modules available, so just legacy mode disabled, and UEFI. You need WDS, Windows Deployment Services, in your DHCP as well. You need some certificates, PKI, and so you have to configure group policy settings in order just to make this feature to be available. I mean, you can unlock BitLocker protected drives on specific computers on a server without being necessary to provide a PIN when the computer is started. In implementation requesting TPM and as well a PIN protection, and you must be able to handle these questions related to this. Another feature you should be prepared to answer some questions in the exam is this one: how to recover from Active Directory. Well, the recovery keys from BitLocker. We have such a feature. You have to configure settings in group policy options. You should be able to see the BitLocker recovery key somewhere there. So this is available. The recovery key is available to administrators in your Active Directory environment. And be aware that, and I think troubleshooting, they're requesting for the exam to be familiar with troubleshooting of this feature. I think we have some additional discussion about this in the next slide. Well, you should be familiar for the exam as well with this tool, BitLocker Administration and Monitoring tool, that you have. It's a part of the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. And it's providing end-to-end automation for BitLocker, like key retrieval, agent-based user guidance. You can do everything. It's integrated with PowerShell and SCCM. And you must be able to, you have reports, you have monitoring for BitLocker implementation in your environment, so you must be familiar with this tool. So, about encryption file system. All stuff, I think it's well known here. There are no new features in Windows Server 2016. However, you'll see some questions in the exam because it's included in the exam topics. So the only change is about the encryption protocols used because, many years ago they started with, it was DAS standard, a modified DAS, but now we're using advanced encryption standard. And even it's available in Windows Server 2016, and this is important. This is a new encryption protocol, XTS, Advanced Encryption Standard, because XTS is compatible with FIPS, Federal Information Protection Standard. And this is new. For example, if you are using this, you can change the settings in order to use XTS AES in encryption protocol. But those files are not available. Encrypted files, they are not available in previous versions of the Windows Server to be decrypted, to have access to. Well, here I'm not insisting because everything is well known. Please make sure you understand the difference between the BitLocker and encryption file system. So which one it was implemented first? Encryption file system, of course, many years ago. Why? Because at the time, the hardware is not so, it was not so fast in order to allow you on a regular machine to encrypt the full drive. And instead, they prefer to encrypt file by file, including the encryption to be a dedicated process of encryption of a singular file, individual file, But now we are using BitLocker. It's not impacting the performance. And however, you should be prepared to take some questions, to answer some questions. In which situation it's more efficient to use encryption file system comparing to BitLocker? Yeah. Because even BitLocker is more popular, honestly, right now. Yeah. But there are some particular situations you are invited. Maybe it's better to use encryption file system. Yeah. Okay. So another another thing to consider when you're talking about encryption file system is the recovery agent, how to implement a recovery agent, how to export that certificate, do not store that certificate, including the private key, which is that certificate which is automatically assigned to the first domain admin on the first domain controller you are installing a domain. Yeah, to be familiar with the procedures for recovery. So BitLocker recovery, it's easier. Yeah, but encryption file system is not so easy to handle. Yeah. Okay. So about implementing server patching and updating solutions, not sure if we could find something new here. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that everybody is very familiar with Windows Server Update Services. It's not connected to a particular version of Windows Server, so we have the same versions. However, please check your knowledge, because yeah, questions coming from here, how to set up especially computers groups, how to set up approvals, deployment. Actually, this topic is not new for this exam, because you had in the first exam, or in even different exams, in the MCSA track, this is included, this topic is included, yeah, about WSAS, yeah. Configuring reporting, this is important, configuring reporting, and troubleshooting. Be aware that there are a lot of questions related to troubleshooting in our exam. And troubleshooting is not anytime something to handle very easy. Yeah, you should be familiar with a lot of topics, you have to memorize, and you have to practice something, yeah, related to this. For example, we'll have some topics related to troubleshooting. Yeah, troubleshooting. What to do in a particular scenario, for example, then when you cannot connect to WSAS server, and so checking the protocols, or even, for example, when WSAS is stopping, you should even reinstall WSAS. Okay, quite easy, but yeah, you should be prepared to answer such questions. Well, another topic in the first objective of the exam, remember that it's a big one, implementing malware protection. So main topics, if you were reading a bit here, the main topics: Windows Defender, App Locker. Well, familiar topics, right? Not something new or suspicious here, I can say. Okay, but you can see in the bottom here, you could see something that it's really new in Windows Server 2016, like implementing control flow guard, implement code integrity device guard policies, policy rules, code integrity file rules. It's about device guard. Yeah, it's about device guard, and we're going to discuss a bit more about this. By the way, you could notice maybe in some of the slides presenting some exam topics, you can see a small guy struggling, digging a lot, yeah, to prepare to handle the questions here. Okay, so Windows Defender. Some topics you should be prepared to handle, because I'm pretty sure that everybody knows how to configure Windows Defender, real-time protection, and so cloud-based protection, and so you have to be familiar with the settings there that are really new settings we had now before in the previous versions of Windows Server. The options like we do have in settings here. Be familiar with the integration of Windows Defender and software update service. How to configure automatically updating the signature files and so the updates. Configuring the group policy settings for Windows Defender and PowerShell. We have a module. You could see here a lot of commandlets, including something like, here you should see a lot of commandlets including MP here. Yeah. That is a module including the Defender defending Defender commandlets. And you should be familiar how to handle the questions in the exam, how to configure everything in Windows Defender using just PowerShell. About AppLocker. So AppLocker is not a new feature as well. Actually, we had one even older, software restriction policies, you remember maybe more than 10 years ago. AppLocker rules, how to build AppLocker rules, rule types. We have for different rules. You can establish different rules for executable files, for Windows installer files, for scripts, including PowerShell scripts, for package app rules, for universal apps, DLL rules as well. So we have more options to build dedicated rules for separate type of files. Attributes, file version, file name, product, publisher name, and so. Well, not insisting here because AppLocker, it should be very familiar to all of us. But this is new. Control flow guard. Well, it's a feature of Windows Server 2016? Not actually. It's just an option to configure by developers in Visual Studio. When they are going to configure the apps to run, they should include this option, if the application is dedicated, is going to run on CFG aware versions of Windows, including Windows Server 2016, to include this option. That is an option before compiling a file, and you have the opportunity to test dump bin. It's executable commandlet. You are able to test if your app it's supporting control flow guard feature. So the components are data execution prevention if the operating system and the hardware supporting this. Okay, and ASLR, address space layout randomization as well. Okay. So actually it's doing something very similar that Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit it's doing. This new feature, control flow guard. So it's something to configure in the applications that are going to run on Windows Server 2016. So an important topic, it's this one about device guard, Windows Defender device guard. So device guard, it's actually an enhanced version of AppLocker. It's creating more complex opportunity to build whitelists, to do whitelisting for applications. That's basic, and it's including as well can include different scenarios, even more complex scenarios. For example, including checking the hardware. If the hardware is compatible, if a particular application is compatible with a particular type of hardware. And you have to consider in the implementation, you have to consider some policies, you have to consider policies for whitelisting the applications. And for whitelisting, we have even more options compared to AppLocker. You have established some file rule, code integrity file rules, for example. So the basic idea is when you're implementing device guard policies, checking anytime if even the hardware is supporting that application, and not only for the code integrity for that application. So you are able to establish more complex rule in order to do to create a list of applications allowed to run on a particular device. And of course, we're managing most of the options for device guard. We are managing using PowerShell. There is no other option to manage. For example, if you are implementing, you are installing some applications on a reference computer, and after that you are actually extracting the configuration from there in a policy for a policy code integrity policy, and based on this you are checking new devices if they are compatible with this policy. Well, it's a complex topic. You are not, for the exam, you don't have to manage everything very well because it's a very complex topics, and Microsoft is still working on this to make this feature, device guard, to be more friendly, because now it's not very friendly. If you're looking at the interface, you have to implement different features, including using just PowerShell and so configuration files and so. But they are not, for the exam, they are not expecting you to be familiar end to end. With all implementation, but just to have an idea what it's about, how it's working, and so. By the way, an interesting topic is if I'm going to use device guard, should I still use app locker, or not necessary? This is a good question. Yeah, even device guard may be seen like an successor, more advanced feature compared to AppLocker. There are still some scenarios you are invited to use both of them. For example, if you're considering a universal application to be installed on a device, using device guard, if the application is compatible, application is signed, code integrity is checked, is compatible with the hardware. So you are not blocking, device guard is not blocking installation of that application on your machine. And in some shadow IT scenarios, are you familiar with shadow IT? Probably yes, yeah, most of you. What is shadow IT? Yeah, well, we're talking about the ability of our users in our IT environment to install applications not in the list of the approved application. Why? Because they're connecting using their own devices in a bring your own device implementation, and if the application is trusted, it's somewhere published in a store, in a legitimate store, they are able to install it. Yeah, it's not like applying a very strict group policy settings. Yeah, they are able to install that application. And maybe that application is not allowed by the business policies in organization. Yeah, this is the idea of shadow IT. Yeah, and actually, device guard is not blocking. If the application is trusted, somewhere in the store, it's published somewhere in the store, it's signed, it's digital, it's signed, it's compatible with the hardware. Yeah. User able to install that application. So instead, if you don't want, for example, such universal apps to be installed on your devices, I mean, servers, because we're talking about Windows Server, you have to add some app locker policies in the top of device guard policies. So this is an example. You can continue to use app locker in your environment even if you are relying on device guard policies. Yeah. Okay, so protect credentials, credential guard. Well, and how to configure device credential guard, and there is a topic here in the bottom about implementing anti-alarm blocking. Yeah, credential guard. So what is credential guard? You are storing anti-alarm and Kerberos secret in an isolated local security LSA process. So actually, the hashes of the credentials are not accessible to any local admin on the machine because the credentials are not stored in the LSA subsystem, right? Subsystem service. So instead, the credentials are stored somewhere in a small virtual machine and accessible not to any local admin. In order to implement this, you have your hardware to support UEFI and TPM as well to store the secrets there. You have to implement GPO group policy settings supported by WMI queries, and so it's a very efficient way to protect the local credentials. Actually, Credential Guard, it's just I can say it's a subsystem of Device Guard. Yeah, we had a previous a short discussion about this. Yeah, you could see Credential Guard like an additional subsystem. I mean a subsystem included in Device Guard. Yeah, about anti-LM blocking. Well, anti-LM blocking, it could be very useful because if you want to rely only on Kerberos, so there is an option to limit and to restrict using anti-LM in group policy, right? There are different options there. You can restrict usage, anti-LM usage in most organizations, so you don't want anti-LM credential to be stored, doesn't matter, yeah, in LSA system or in the virtualization-based security system, right? Okay, so next topic about creating security baselines. So a tool that you should be familiar with this for the exam, Security Compliance Manager. It's a dedicated topic. You have to be familiar with this tool. Well, it's a dedicated tool you are installing. At this time, we have already, because previously the templates were not available templates for Windows Server 2016 and for Windows 10. And this tool, it's version 4, Security Compliance Manager version 4. You can download it. You can see template. If you are looking particularly here, what you can see, just a second, yeah, you can see here default configuration, Microsoft configuration, and the customized configuration that actually you can work. So it's particularly a version, you do remember maybe security templates before we have all tools in Windows, but this security compliance manager, it's basically a new version for this. You have the opportunity to import settings for some templates. How? So using group policy backup. So if you want to, you have the opportunity to import some settings using group policy backup. If you have a reference computer, for example, if you want to export, you are exporting the group policy settings, and after that you will be able to import group policy settings from the backup. You are importing on this tool, Microsoft Security Compliance Manager. You have as well the opportunity to work with Security Compliance Manager files, dedicated files, CAB files. The extension is CAB, yeah, for those files, dedicated files. You have the opportunity to export in Excel, in GPO backup folder back, yeah, even SCAP, Security Content Automation Protocol, which is a standard, yeah, SCCM, for example. So you have multiple options to configure the security settings, to import, export security settings and such. Templates, by the way, templates you could find here are read-only. So in order to modify directly a template, you should duplicate. You have the option to duplicate, and after that you're good to configure all options there. Yeah. Okay. So as well, you should remember this tool, lgpo.exe. It's a command line utility to automate the management of local group policy objects. Yeah, local group policy objects. Because we had one which is deprecated, it's not recommended. So you probably, if you could see in the new exam, you could see some questions about LGPO tool. Please make sure you're familiar